What's going on, everybody? It's that time again. The AllSooners Podcast, episode 172 on this Wednesday, February 1st, 2023. Josh Callaway in Oklahoma City, Ryan Chapman and more, John Hoover in Tulsa. Gentlemen, how are we doing?
We're doing great, I guess. We got the schedule. We're scheduled up through the fall now. We know where we're going and when we're going to be there, supposedly. We'll see.
Yeah.
It's been really nice because it means that I know our good friend Josh Callaway has some peace of mind with knowing where everything's going. But no, in years past, this hasn't really mattered, right? Because it's like, hey, here are the teams that Oklahoma's playing. These are the 9 teams. We already know the home. We already know the road. It's just what the order is, when that bye week is, all that stuff. This was the only reason I think I cared so much, because I was like, there is no guarantee of who, what, when, where, and all that stuff. Right. So I was like, let's just get this thing out there and going. So it's hard for us hacks to make offseason projections when we don't know who Oklahoma's playing. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And you're right. Peace of mind, but also fear, because I have to dread Utah in late November for 10 months now. It's going to be weighing on me. It's going to be hanging over me, but it is what it is. And I look forward to it. I used the gif of, Jack Nicholson in The Shining, where he just is frozen to death. That's what I imagine it'll be. That's the scene in late November in Provo. But we'll worry about that when we get there. We got a long road before then. The schedule did finally drop. It's a miracle. Late Monday night, Big 12 puts out, it's coming out tomorrow at 1. It was like, all right, finally, let's go ahead and do this thing. And they did. They dropped it right at 1. I was expecting Big 12 to make us wait to 1:15 or something. But it was 1 o'clock. They dropped it. We now know Oklahoma's schedule. I'll rattle it off real quick, just 12 games. We already knew, obviously, you open with Arkansas State and SMU at home. Then you go to Tulsa. We already knew that. At Cincinnati is the first Big 12 game. Iowa State at home, the Texas game. Then you have your bye week after 6, right in the middle. UCF comes to town. Storylines galore there. At Kansas, at Oklahoma State, West Virginia at home. At Provo, like I just said, for the last road game. And then TCU comes to Norman on Black Friday to round out the season. That's going to be a very interesting game. Could be potentially a blockbuster type game, depending on how the season goes. But on paper, it looks like it could be one. There you have it. Schedule is finally out. Just we're going to get all into the nuts and bolts of it. That's what February football talk is for, is this kind of thing. Just right off the top, first takeaways. What jumped out to you when you first finally saw this? We had heard whispers about the possibility of some of these opponents, but like Ryan was saying, we had no clue the order. What jumped out off the screen to you when you first saw this thing drop finally yesterday?
Well, the first thing was Monday night, right? When we got the hint from fbschedules.com that they clipped a screenshot of TCU's actual schedule. It was accidentally leaked and posted that they took down immediately, but they had TCU coming to Oklahoma on Black Friday. That's the first thing that jumped out to me, because I think Oklahoma is going to move heaven and earth to get that thing moved back to Saturday. OU abhors playing Friday night football games at home, and I think they're going to do everything in their power to get that thing moved back to Saturday.
Yeah, for me, it was I don't really think we had the Dillon Gabriel rematch, because UCF was leaking left, right, and center. TCU accidentally leaked the entire schedule that we saw the next day. I think Houston was tripping over themselves to call Ross Dellinger and tell them that they were hosting Texas. There was a lot of, oh my God, look who we got.
Yeah.
But once that sunk in, for me, the biggest thing was who is not on the schedule for Oklahoma. This is a team that went 3-6 last year in the Big 12. And so if you're trying to chart the year 2 progress, okay, you start thinking about close games the Sooners played, all that stuff. What can they flip from a loss to a win? Well, guess what? Under the old scheduling model, OU would have had to go to Kansas State, a game that they lost last year. Don't worry about it. Not on the schedule. OU would have had to go to Baylor, where they were trying to avoid losing 3 straight to the Bears. Don't worry about it. Not on the schedule. Texas Tech looks like they're on the rise. And obviously we were there in Lubbock for that wild regular season finale. Don't worry about it. It's not there. Literally the only thing that could have been better for Oklahoma, because you knew you were playing Texas, so that's not a loss you can take off the schedule, is if you had flopped Houston for TCU and played the Cougars instead of the Horned Frogs. Otherwise, it's about as favorable as it gets for Oklahoma because that West Virginia, that's a home game. That's a loss they lost last year. Getting TCU at home, and then Texas is Texas. As far as that goes, I thought that was very favorable for Oklahoma, even though they're going to have to do a lot of traveling between Provo and Cincinnati.
Yeah, and the three that you take out, you replace them with Cincinnati and UCF. Those are very manageable games for Oklahoma for sure, and obviously BYU. But that's a little more challenging being on the road, like you said, in late November. What, November 18th?
18th.
What the heck?
November 18th. Yeah,
yeah. And just to be clear, just to clarify for Josh, he's dreading that trip to Provo November 18th, not because he hates Provo, not because he hates Utah, not because he hates BYU, because he's the one of us three that sits outside in the elements during the game and shoots the video. So, yeah, buckle up, bundle up, Josh, and stay warm.
Yeah, I shot one game last year and got the flu. Basically, I did Josh's job for one game and got the flu and missed the next game.
It's I love being on the field, and I think Utah will be really cool. I think it's one of the more scenic. I mean, I do look forward to it. I dread it, but I look forward to it at the same time. But yeah, I mean, there's some very snowy potential for that game, I would think. I'm not a Utah connoisseur. The only time I've ever been in Utah is the Salt Lake City airport on a layover. So I've never really been to Utah for real. So we'll see. I look forward to it, though. Cincinnati, I don't know what to make of that one. Were you at the last Cincinnati game?
Yes.
What was it like? What was the intel? This one is expected to be at Nippert, whereas that one was at the Bengals Stadium.
Right. It was Paul Brown back then in 2010, I think. But this one is, I don't know if they can sell a bunch of tickets, they'll move it to the Bengals Stadium again. It was September, so it was fine. This will be September 2. So I'm sure the weather will be nice. We're going to get some Italian food. There's a little Italian neighborhood that's just, I think, east of the stadium. So we'll get some Italian food there. I'll tell you guys when we get closer to the actual game what the name of the place is. I don't want it sold out when I go there. It's basically why I'm not going to reveal it. So, but there's a place. It's really good.
Well, it's going to end up being about the same time as that first trip to Cincinnati, Oklahoma's only trip in program history to Cincinnati, because remember that was when you had 4 non-conference games. This one is the first conference game for Oklahoma, and so not a bye week or anything like that. So in the first 4 weeks of the season, it should be pretty good. So if it stays at Nippert, that'll be OU's first ever trip to Nippert. It's going to be OU's first ever trip to Provo. Oklahoma's played BYU twice. One of those was in the 94 Copper Bowl in Tucson. The other was the first American football game to ever be played at Jerry World. Chelsea Football Club, of course, played the first sporting event ever at Jerry World. Yeah. But I know Oklahoma fans would not like to remember that BYU game, maybe get a little bit of revenge. But there's a reason we're talking about these road games, guys, because you mentioned it, Oklahoma doesn't like to play Friday home games. They sure don't want to play, I would assume, a Friday home game considering what the home slate is this year. Josh, you went through it. There's some pretty gross games as far as just face value, sticker shock, all that stuff. I understand that it was supposed to be Georgia and that SMU's the replacement, and there's really not a ton OU could do. But I went through and totaled it up, and head over to AllSooners.com. Not only did we have the schedule released, but we had our takeaways. TCU went to the CFP. There's going to be questions about what they're doing. But if you take TCU out of it, the rest of Oklahoma's home games, those teams went 28-35 last year combined. So you got TCU and not a lot else coming into Norman.
Yeah, no, it is a favorable schedule, like you said. You get 3 of the newbies. You don't play Houston. And it's funny. My wife, Madeline, showed me a thing yesterday on College Football Reddit. And it was all these fans of the new teams, UCF, BYU, Cincinnati, all kind of reacting to their schedule and being like, I don't know if we're cut out for this. Like actually seeing the schedule on the screen, and they're like, these feel like we're going to lose a lot of games. So it's kind of funny to be on the other side of it because the Big 12 is looked at as such a, an easy ride for the most part. But these new teams coming in are looking at their slate like, oh my God, we have to play a real team every week. This is going to be tough.
In 2 years, maybe 1 year, Oklahoma and Texas are going to be going through that same thing. Yeah. They're going to be pulling those SEC games going, oh, crap. This is for real.
We may go 5-7 or 6-6 or whatever.
Yeah. Did you guys catch Josh Pate's take?
I haven't listened back to it yet.
Well, he just said essentially for in Oklahoma's case, hey, Oklahoma, on your way out, we're going to give you a November 18th game in Provo. It's the third road game for you in 4 weeks, and then you get a short week the following week to finish up with our basically defending champion almost, your CFP team, TCU. The Big 12 didn't do Oklahoma any favors, is what Josh Pate is saying on this. One of the road games is Kansas, not a hard road game. One of the road games is Oklahoma State. Physically, you're right up the road, not a hard road game, so it's a little overstated.
Yeah.
But yeah, that finishing at BYU on a Saturday night, probably turn around and play TCU at home on a Friday night. That's a bit of a challenge, even if you're Oklahoma.
Yeah, no, 100%. That was where I was going to go next. Was what is the toughest game or stretch that jumps out to you as like that could be where maybe the wheels fall off or where they collect some losses, because it does feel like that end stretch of playing BYU and Provo and then TCU on a short week after that long trip feels kind of dicey. I mean, it could be. We don't know what any of these teams are going to be. Coming into last year, we all thought Baylor was going to be really good, and they weren't.
Yep.
Now they did beat OU, but obviously OU won 6 games, which we didn't expect either. So it's hard to project that stuff on February 1st, but that jumps off the screen. But is there anything noticeable here that you're looking at as saying that's a tough game or tough full stretch that jumps off the page, I guess?
No,
because not really.
Not
it's
with
a pretty
this,
favorable schedule.
Not really, not with this particular schedule. It's not like, oh my God, that's 3 of the last 4 going into that TCU game, like Josh said, are road games. So logistically, a little bit of a challenge. I think the BYU game, just by its nature, it's going to be their senior day. They're already talking about, hey, we get a senior day and we get to welcome in Oklahoma. So they're already fired up about that. That's going to be a challenge. And then finishing the season with the team that just went to the CFP, sure, that'll be a challenge. But remember, we projected last year TCU was supposed to be like 5-7 and finish 7th in the conference or 8th in the conference, right. And they came out of nowhere. So in this age, I'll bring it up using the old man term. In this age of transfer portal, it's just tough to predict and project who's going to be really good, especially when we get to November.
Yeah, absolutely. So really, that's kind of what Chisholm Hall and I were talking yesterday on the radio. Like, I feel like we have to have 2 conversations. Conversation 1 is like, OU has to get a lot better for this to even really matter as far as what we're talking, projecting schedule, toughest stretch, all that stuff. But the second part is all we're able to do is look at what they did last year and try to pick through some portal additions. And it's not an overly, oh my gosh, a grueling slate. Like, you look at what TCU has in November, and then you look at Oklahoma being like, okay, yeah, you got to hit the road, but you have to go to Stillwater, which, like Hoover said, not a grueling road trip, game intense, but as far as the travel getting there, not bad. A bad West Virginia team's coming into Norman. You head out to BYU, who may not be very good, even though they're juiced. So that's a mental trip if Oklahoma takes those steps forward. TCU. I mean, outside of that, are we trying to circle the Iowa State game as your quintessential trap game of like Oklahoma has 2 road games? One of them's half a road game, kind of, because it's going to Tulsa, heading over to Cincinnati, where that Scott Satterfield, like, that's going to look a lot different. We don't know what that's going to be like. You got Texas on the other side of the Cyclones, and then an open week on the other side of Texas. So everyone's just like, get to Texas, and you've got the bye week. I don't think Iowa State's going to be any good, but if the defense can continue to play at the level they've played, like, that has every recipe of like, hey, you're coming back home for 1 week. Everyone's juiced for Texas. Should still be, you'd hope if everything goes right and Oklahoma makes those improvements, 4-0. Everyone's feeling good. This is different. The Big 12 slate started different than it did last year. Got to avenge the embarrassment of 49-0. And oh, by the way, it's an Iowa State team that's just a pain in the butt to play any given time, whether they're good or they're not.
Yeah, no, and they come in Norman, like you said, kind of sandwiched right in a kind of a funny spot there. So we'll see. Everything you know now, roster, whatever, and these are not final at all. We'll make final ones later. What's a win total there, you think, looking at this? What's a win total that you can, Oklahoma's conceivably going to get or / you're expecting on February 1st? I mean, because to me, 9 wins, 10 wins, I mean, there's a lot of winnable games on here.
That's a good question, Josh. Let's project it out. Arkansas State, SMU, Tulsa, 3-0 at Cincinnati, 4th game. I'm going to say they'd win that one, go 4-0.
Right.
Iowa State at home. I'm going to say they win that one. Matt Campbell has given them some problems in Norman and in Ames, obviously, but I'm going to say they win that one. That's 5-0. Texas, toss your coin. I know last year was 49-0, but who knows with OU Texas. Let's just say they lose that one and they're 5-1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-1. UCF at home, they win that one 6-1. At Kansas 7-1. We think we'll see what the Jayhawks have up.
It's a little funky,
and they've got 85 scholarship players for the first time.
Do they have 85 right now?
Yeah, that was their big for the first time in a decade. It's been 10 years, guys, but they used this window, like Britt Venables said, of different roster constraints, and they're back to 85. So shout out to Lance Leipold.
Yeah. Since Kansas hasn't beaten Oklahoma in 30 some years, right? I think it is. We'll go ahead and project OU to win that one. That's 7-1. Oklahoma State.
A depleted Oklahoma State.
They're not going to be any good.
Is Alan Bowman alive by Bedlam? Is he still kicking? That's the question.
They've lost a bunch of talent. They've lost coaches. 8-1. BYU, West Virginia, and TCU is the key stretch for them. They need to win that one at home. 9-1 at BYU. Let's just say things go crazy and they lose one of those last two. I say 10 wins is a real easy projection for this schedule.
Yeah, and that's, again, you could roll out the same OU team that played last year that was wildly inconsistent, and you replace K-State, Baylor, and Tech with a Cincinnati team that has questions, UCF that's just not been able to find those levels that they hit under Frost, and then on the road to BYU, like, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to flip those into wins just because you're playing worse teams. So that's without any projection, and based off what we talked about of Oklahoma hitting the portal, stuff like that, like, big, massive red flags, I think, unless there's just a couple of these teams that come out of nowhere, TCU style. If Oklahoma doesn't get to 9 wins, that's where you start really raising your eyebrows of, is this coaching staff kind of got this thing together? Seriously.
Yeah, based off this schedule, if they're 3-2 or 3-3 or something, I think we'll be seeing the Jackson Arnold show before too long. They need to get off to a good start, at least. I think that's safe to say. We'll do the conspiracy theory thing. Oklahoma and Texas are the only teams in the Big 12, as it stands now, that have interacted with the conference schedule in zero fashion. The schedule is not current. I won't speak for Texas as much. For Oklahoma, the schedule is not on the website, which actually works out great for us. If you Google OU football schedule, our story pops up, which is really funny. Because the schedule is not on the website. It's nowhere to be found on OU. They have no information about it. They didn't send out a release about it. They didn't tweet about it. What gives? What is this? Why do you guys make that this is happening? What could the reason be for Oklahoma and Texas just basically not acknowledging that the schedule is out?
Has college football not gotten weird?
Weird.
I mean, think about the PR spin, the good look, the optics that go into this. This looks bad all around when your two flagship schools who are leaving and have acknowledged we're leaving and everybody's saying, good, there's the door, get out. They haven't even acknowledged this schedule. Now, the only semi-official thing that has come up is Longhorn Network's Twitter has tweeted the schedule in format of various screenshots of SpongeBob SquarePants, which is freaking hilarious, especially the Kansas one. It's hilarious. That's as close as we've gotten to anything official from any of the schools. Texas has not posted any new links. Everybody's got their own kind of news channel, not channel. What am I trying to say? Maybe a link, a front page that you can go to on the website where, hey, this is our top story. Neither Oklahoma nor Texas's official website has anything regarding this schedule. It is bizarre.
Yeah, as of the time of recording, you popped over to SoonerSports.com. There's nothing there. This is not accidental. I know that a lot of people have speculated about it, but I can tell you this is not accidental. This was directive, maybe putting it strong. Coordinated is not the right word either, but it is no accident, and this is not a coincidence, and this is intentional. So for me, that just, in my head, this is speculation corner. But in my head, I'm just like, okay, so we had the schedule that has been pushed back. And the schedule that Oklahoma has is it's a version of the schedule that Josh and I had seen before. So Oklahoma's schedule was not changed. We had this announcement be pushed back at least 3 different times. What was holding it up then? What is going on there? Yeah. And spinning out of that, why would Oklahoma and Texas then respond to this in this way? That's what kind of makes my gears spin of trying to figure out, is this a unhappy with the schedule? Is this a unhappy with behind the scenes stuff as far as trying to negotiate other parts, moving parts of the contract to get out early or pay out? Like, I don't know, but that's where my brain immediately went to, because otherwise this is just really, really weird when it's been awkward, but the Big 12, Texas and Oklahoma have played nice the last year, at least on social media. It's been awkward, and this is the first real line in the sand, it feels like.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, Ryan. Line in the sand. Put yourself in the boardroom right now between Chris Del Conte, Joe Castiglione, and Brett Yormark, and maybe some of the other athletic directors in the Big 12. Those guys are saying to OU and Texas, here's what we want before you leave. Here's the guarantees. We're going to hold your feet to the fire on this, and you're going to promise us that. This is under contract. You're going to fulfill these contract terms. Oklahoma and Texas are like, wait a minute, we've got these ideas and we'd rather do this, and you've treated us this way and you've ignored us. And what about all this officiating where Oklahoma had, what was it, offensive line, the opposing offensive line had one holding call on them called against the entire season?
Yeah.
Those things are sticking in people's craws. And when you go into the boardroom and you start negotiating and you start talking about, leaving early or buying out or whatever, you better believe these things are coming up. You better believe. So I think this is just OU and Texas's way of being petty. I'd like to think that. I don't think they're going to come out and make any landmark kind of earth-changing announcements. They may come out and say, we've talked to our television partners and we moved that damn TCU game off of Friday night. They may say something like that. I don't know, but I just get the feeling that really nobody's happy about the way this thing is being treated. Not the two schools, about the way the Big 12 has handled it, and the Big 12 members are not happy about the way OU and Texas have handled it.
They just want to play Nebraska at night, guys. That's all. That was.
They just wanted to play Nebraska.
All you had to do.
Yeah, I wonder what. I think it is a chance that it gives you a peek behind the curtain a little bit, kind of like you guys are saying as to why it was delayed so many times. Oklahoma and Texas were at the center of it, which you could probably guess. But the negotiation for leaving the conference, preferably a year early, 2024, I think was probably a large part of what took so long to get this finalized. And I think Oklahoma and Texas's actions or lack thereof kind of confirms that in a roundabout way.
I'll be interested to see, too, what role Fox has in all this. Because remember, if we circle all the way back to, was it Bruce Feldman or The Athletic? Whoever had it first, apologies. The stories came out within a week of each other about, like, yes, the Big 12, OU, and Texas are talking about an early exit and exploring what that would look like. Remember, the one of the big things in the room is not Oklahoma, not Texas, not the Big 12, but the fact that Fox is going to roll up and be like, wait. We give you this money, Big 12 Conference, because we get our pick of OU Texas games. Like, we get in the rotation to draft that bad boy. And if OU and Texas are gone in 2024, the value of our contract is a lot less. And so there was going to have to be basically behind the scenes, ESPN and Fox negotiating stuff and then talking to the conference, all that. I just wonder, it's not just a matter of getting OU, Texas, and the rest of the Big 12 and Brett Yormark in the room. Like, that, there were other circumstances with TV partners and all that. And I wonder how much that can put a drag on things, which would make sense why, if you have that many moving parts, this thing got pushed back a couple of times.
Yeah, and consider that losing that inventory, if you're a TV network, you've already negotiated the prices, you've already negotiated the buyout, the revenue stream, all that. The dollar figures are on paper. Everything's done. OU and Texas leave early. The other schools are now having to adjust their budgets because why? Because OU and Texas left early and they're being paid less by the networks. I could see where there should be some real sore feelings in this thing on both sides.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, we'll wrap up on this. The public perception, I think, of this whole release has not gone very well for the Big 12, because if you look at any of these major outlets, Fox, CBS, ESPN, whatever, they put out these lists of most highly anticipated Big 12 games. They're all OU and Texas games, almost exclusively. And then, like Ryan referenced earlier, BYU and one of their official accounts puts out this whole video breaking down how excited they are to have Oklahoma for the last game of the year. And it's like, man, the other schools in this conference just don't elicit that kind of response. So Oklahoma and Texas are winning without even saying anything, which makes it even better.
If they were that excited, you'd think that BYU would have sprung for a separate sign for Oklahoma and Texas in the press box.
It's true. That's true. Splitting the OU Texas on the pro. We'll get to see that sign with our actual eyeballs. I look forward to it. I will take a photo of it to prove that it is real, to verify it. Schedule's out. Feels good.
I don't know if photographers are allowed in the press box, Josh.
They're not.
You got to stay down there.
New Big 12 stadium. We don't know what their rules are.
Right. It's a whole new world.
We have to spend the entire 8 hours outside.
It's a whole new world out there. They're not even used to being in a conference. They haven't been in a conference period in forever. So they're going to be. Yeah. They might not know what's going on over there.
I think since the Mountain West, right?
Mountain West, and they were independent for however long, 10 years or so.
Yeah, like last 10 years or so, something like that.
Yeah, so going to be new world for them, new world for Cincinnati. It's going to feel like we're not even in conference play because the first conference game's at Cincy. It's going to feel like an extra non-con game, but
yeah,
it's going to be fun to get these new teams in here. UCF coming is fun for obvious reasons, the Gabriel Levy thing. So there's some fun games on here. It's kind of ugly in some areas, but it's nice to have a schedule. It just feels good, and I will look at it often as we count it down.
We'll be eating some Skyline chili in September. I know that.
I've never had it, so I feel like I have to.
Get that fired
Listen, when it comes to chili, when you think Skyline, you have to change or lower your expectations. It's not traditional chili. It's totally not chili. People think, oh, that's terrible chili. Well, actually, it's not chili. It's something else you can eat besides chili. So stop hating on Skyline chili. I will eat 2 plates of that stuff.
All I know is that I will be rushing to get flights that land early Friday morning, both for the Utah or the BYU trip and the Cincinnati trip to explore some new Big 12 cities that we haven't been to yet. So
yeah, we may go in on a Thursday, boys,
for the one and only time.
That's right.
One go at it. This really weird Big 12.
Then we'll do the same thing the next year in the SEC.
Right, that'll be a whole new world. Hashtag Aladdin on that one. All right, we'll wrap up this segment. We'll come back. Feels good to have a schedule. I'm going to look forward to it a lot. I imagine Arkansas State is going to be the ESPN Plus game right out of the gate, the opener. I can't imagine SMU would be. I would think a network would want that. And then obviously at Tulsa is on the road. So I think we're going to have an ESPN Plus game right out of the gate. So rip the Band-Aid off for fans there. And should be fun. I look forward to it. There's some fun games on there.
Buy that 30-day trial, that free 30-day trial, and then you're done.
If you're gonna watch any softball or baseball or whatever, you're gonna already have it because like 90% of their games are gonna be on there. So just keep it. It's worth it. Keep it. That Kansas basketball game was on there yesterday. ESPN has no problem putting big games on there. So just keep it. It's worth it. All right, we'll wrap up. Come back. Recruiting stuff. Oklahoma has made some additions. Today actually is signing day. Doesn't feel like it because the first signing day is. The real signing day is now December, but they did make a signee today. We'll talk about that as long as some other preferred walk-ons that they've added in the last week or so. Also look at the NFL a little bit. Bunch of OU guys at the Super Bowl. We'll break that down as well. Next up here on the AllSooners Podcast. On Twitter, you can follow AllSooners at @all_Sooners. Ryan's at _Ryan Chapman. Hooves at John E. Hoover. I'm at Josh M. Callaway. Our website is allsooners.com. We are a Fan Nation affiliate, part of the Sports Illustrated Network. All right. Segment 2 here on this episode 172. Oklahoma has been busy on the recruiting trail as of late, very busy. They've sent out a ton of offers in the state of Oklahoma. They've also added a bunch of guys. We'll dive into that right here now. We'll start with the one guy who is a scholarship signee today. Like we mentioned before the break there, today is signing day. Doesn't feel like it because the December signing day has essentially just replaced the February one as the real signing day. But they did make an addition to their recruiting class today, officially, with Taylor Heim from Bethany High School. I've had the pleasure to actually call him a couple times doing high school games for my other job. He did absolutely everything for Bethany. I was hesitant to even say what position he was. Listed as a linebacker, but he did everything. I mean, he caught passes. They would let him throw passes. He would run the ball. He did play defense, obviously. I mean, he was just out there. He was just a football player guy for Bethany. So I wasn't even really sure like what his actual position was because he was just out there all the time. But he is listed as a linebacker, 3-star according to 247 Sports, number 12 player in Oklahoma by their rankings. So we'll see how he works out. I mean, these local kids, Oklahoma has made an effort to continue to add locally, and we already had this once. So if you guys remember when Eric McCarty was added in the last cycle, of kind of like, oh, well, is this cycle, I guess, but it felt so long ago. But it was kind of a, say, walk on, what position does he play? And then he's a scholarship player. Okay, he can actually play. I think that's kind of a similar thing going on with Jaime here. I think he's, we'll get to talk to Brent about him eventually, but it's an interesting addition. He's a good football player, so we'll see how it pans out.
Yeah, real good football player. I think he's going to play all 11 positions on offense and all 11 positions on defense.
He's capable.
He's everywhere. He plays literally anything and everything that you want him to play. 6'4", 190, maybe 6'3", 195. He'll probably project to about 210, 215 once he gets that extra weight on him, that good college weight on him, the good college weight, not the bad college weight. And I would think that projects to kind of an outside linebacker, maybe an edge rusher. He is unbelievably athletic. State champ in the long jump, state champ in the 4x100, state champ in the 4x200. And I think he also did triple jump. He plays basketball. He's good at basketball. Threw for 2,300 yards as a quarterback, ran for 1,400 yards and 6 touchdowns. I think he had 52 total touchdowns on offense. But he projects defensively, where he was like the district player of the year, the little city all player of the year, and all that kind of stuff. The kid can play football. He's a great get. And like I said, local. You want those guys on your team.
Yeah, for sure. And the thing that stuck out to me that you kind of mentioned there, Hoove, my man can run, right? He is everywhere, and he can play in space. So that's kind of my big, okay, get Jerry Schmidt working with him. There's not a ton of pressure on him. He doesn't come in with that 5-star pressure or anything like that, right? As far as, where is he playing right now? So, like, I'm confident that Jerry Schmidt will be able to look at him and figure out how much he wants that frame to carry. And then the coaching staff can take that information and say, okay, where do we want to slot him first? Where do we want to start building that base and just see what happens? These are absolutely the kind of, if you're filling out your roster, all that stuff, you mentioned the local connections, that never hurts or anything like that. And he's just a guy that between all of the sports that he plays, the work ethic it looks like he has on the field, like I can imagine that Brent Venables had to take one pass at this film and was like, wait, why hasn't he been offered yet? What did we miss something? Get on that. And so it'll be interesting to see how that pans out for him at Oklahoma.
Absolutely. Don't have a tape of him up there as we speak now, but pretty soon after you're listening to this, we'll have a highlight package of him on AllSooners.com. Recommend you check it out because, like I said, I got to see him a couple times in high school, and I didn't know what his actual position was because he's just out there for every single snap, catching the ball, running the ball, throwing the ball, playing defense, making plays on the ball, tackling, making plays in the secondary, tackling guys in the backfield. He's just everywhere. You say his name constantly. So interested to see what he can look like at the next level. And if he sticks with defense, because that's certainly an option for him to do whatever they need, down the road. Now, I mentioned they've been really busy. They sent out a ton of offers in the last week or so, a lot of them locally. I think like the entire Carl Albert roster almost got an offer the other day, which is not a bad program to check out at all. But they did add several commitments in the last week or so. These are all preferred walk-ons, but we'll run through them real quick, and you guys can talk about if there's one in particular that jumps off the page to you guys. CJ Compton, he's an offensive lineman from Bethel, so another in-state guy. Reed DeQuazy from Carl Albert, plays both offense and defense. I'd imagine he played defense, but I don't know that for sure. From Carl Albert, Drew Batt is an offensive lineman, great name, from Turpin, Oklahoma. And then one guy outside the state, Eli Merck, is a wide receiver from South Carolina. So Oklahoma's made a lot of additions here, kind of supplementing the roster. Is there any of these guys in particular that jump out to you guys as, obviously Gavin Freeman was a preferred walk-on last year, made an impact. Is anybody who you think could maybe do the same in particular from this group? Yeah,
great point on Freeman because he made an impact, a positive impact, a spectacular impact from the very first game of the year. Scored a touchdown on his first touch as a Sooner. So if you're able to get local guys like that, right, and, you lock in their coaches, their high school coaches, you lock in their community, you lock in their families, it's so big for building and establishing and laying a foundation for the program. So you would think that some of those guys have the opportunity to do that. Bat is interesting. 6'8". He's 250 pounds and he played 8-man football. How does that translate? I don't know, but he's 6'8", 250 pounds. Put 35, 40 pounds on him and see what he can do. He played like Taylor Heim. He played kind of every position. He played inside lineman, outside lineman. He plays center some. He plays edge rusher. He just does what he wants to. Imagine, it's 8-man football, so literally he does what he wants to. But I wouldn't say he was like a major priority for them, but a 6'8", 250-pound body walks into your office and says, "Coach, I'd like to walk onto your football team." You better listen to him or at least look at his tape. They did. They saw how disruptive he was. And, welcome to Oklahoma, right? DeQuasie is interesting, if only for the name. A lot of people have already commented on him and his family. Hey, Brent DeQuasie was one of my favorite players back in the 90s, played for all those bad, Gary Gibbs and Schnellenberger teams. That's his uncle. Brent DeQuasie is his uncle. Reed DeQuasie is multi-talented, kind of a multi-tool guy, plays multiple positions. Ran the football, threw the football, had a bunch of tackles on defense. He also caught a bunch of passes. He can do a lot of stuff. So, and he's got that hashtag OU DNA, right, that they love. He's one of those kids that's going to come in there and start telling stories of here's what my dad told me. Here's what my uncle told me. That can only help when you're trying to do what Brent Venables is doing, and that's build that foundation and establish that kind of mentality, change that culture.
Yeah, you hit on DeQuasie, who was the one that I was interested in, if nothing else, for all the connections, the legacy there. You think Porter Moser could use Bat if he doesn't work out for not anymore, I guess. Not anymore. The basketball program is back up and running fully forced. But yeah. It's so hard to project some of these preferred walk-ons because like the situation has to be right. You've got to have a spot like Freeman did where wide receiver was kind of thin a little bit to come in and be that guy. So I'm just going to bet on the measurables of Bat if we're picking one.
Yeah, look forward to seeing how one of these guys is going to pop up and make a play at some point, in the season or whatever. And Reed DeQuasie, a good basketball player too at Carl Albert. So kind of just goes to speak to his kind of like what Hoover was saying, versatile and an athlete. So we'll see how that shakes out.
Yeah.
I like seeing all the Oklahoma kids get chances at OU. That's something that I would like to see the basketball team do more of, quite frankly. And we'll get to basketball later. But there's good players. High school sports in Oklahoma are good. Just go to the good programs, find the players that the coaches like. You're going to find diamonds in the rough often. And I like that this staff is making a better effort to do that.
Yeah, and I'll also add the wide receiver Merck from South Carolina set some school records at his high school in Central South Carolina. I don't know, you look at his film and he's obviously a ball player. He gets the football in his hands, he makes plays, he's explosive. But 6'2", 180, you got guys like that who are willing to walk on from halfway across the country. I say it's a great idea. He's a guy that's got 3,000 yards receiving, over 170 catches, almost 50 touchdowns. So very productive, very athletic, very explosive. Could be the next Gavin Freeman. Who knows?
Absolutely. So you add this group to the group of Bixby guys that they've added recently. And, you've got to, again, like I said, one of these guys is going to pop up at least and make something happen at some point. So keep an eye out for that. They're coming up here very, very shortly in spring and obviously so on. Moving up to the NFL, Super Bowl 57 is set. We have a slew of former Oklahoma players playing in this game. 8 former Sooners are active in the game. 8. Now, 2 of them technically don't count on alumni numbers because they finished their career elsewhere. Grant Calcaterra at SMU, and of course Trey Sermon, who finished at Ohio State. They're both on the Eagles. But even if you remove them, they still have 6, which is still the most of any team in the country in the Super Bowl, which is nuts. Jalen Hurts, obviously, Lane Johnson, Orlando Brown, Creed Humphrey, James Winchester, Blake Bell. And that does not include Tyrese Robinson, who's on the Eagles practice squad, or Kennedy Brooks, who's he has like a reserve future contract with the Eagles. He's not on the current roster. He was. It's a weird deal. I don't try to understand it all. But basically, long story short, 10 total guys are trying to get a ring here in Super Bowl 57, which is crazy for Oklahoma. I mean, what a recruiting tool that is.
Yeah, huge. 53-man roster, right? So that's 106 guys. Essentially, you're saying almost 10%. Almost 10% of the Super Bowl teams are consisting of Oklahoma Sooners or former Sooners. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and it's not just that, too. We talked about this last week, but the thing that remains impressive is it's not like hey, so-and-so's the backup to the backup at linebacker, and he's the 53rd man active. Like, no, Jalen Hurts and Lane Johnson and Orlando Brown and Creed Humphrey are going to be essential in deciding who wins this football game between what the Chiefs and the Eagles like to do. So, like, they are playing key roles in whoever wins the Super Bowl. It's not just one of those, hey, you've got a guy that was a punt returner and that's the only time he plays. Like, no, this game's going to be not just heavily participated with Oklahoma alums, but it's going to be shaped by former Oklahoma players.
Yeah, and how about Jalen Hurts? I mean, we've said that 15 times this year during the football season. How about Jalen Hurts? Unbelievable. First Sooner quarterback in the Super Bowl. First, however you want to qualify Troy Aikman, first Sooner who went from Oklahoma to the NFL, right, and then became a starting quarterback in the Super Bowl. It's unbelievable. Of all the guys that they've put out, Jalen Hurts is the one that's going to the Super Bowl. That's mind-blowing. I remember in 2010 when Sam came out, I was at the draft. I was in New York City, and I had a bunch of writers, a bunch of national writers and New York writers, and they were all coming up to me going, hey, is Sam really the first quarterback to be drafted out of Oklahoma? And I said, I think there's been some guys drafted who played option quarterback who went into the league and played wide receiver or defensive back, right? But yeah, in terms of just the first quarterback drafted from Oklahoma, yes. And that was just 13 years ago now, guys. Here we are with the league is populated with Sooner quarterbacks, and including one of the ones that's going to the Super Bowl. It's unbelievable.
Well, after how Philly celebrated that, the real question is going to be who can claim Jalen Hurts now, Alabama, Oklahoma, or the Syracuse basketball program?
Syracuse basketball.
The Eagles made like a trip to watch Syracuse play on Monday night. I was like, well, this is very random.
I think after what happened on at Lloyd Noble Center, OU gets to claim Jalen Hurts for the foreseeable future for now.
Yeah, probably so.
Yeah. The Jalen Hurts thing, it is amazing because it's just, you look at Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, Tua Tagovailoa, and Mac Jones, the two guys who followed him at Alabama, the two guys who preceded him at OU. He's the best one by a lot. It's kind of insane because
right now,
because he's got
the best talent around him, and he's got the best team.
He's on the best team, but he's playing the best. He's got his team in the Super Bowl. I mean, he was considered a step down from those guys for OU. For Alabama, they moved on from him to get to Tua, and you look at what he's doing. It makes borderline no sense. The guy had no NFL future really at all before he came to OU.
Yeah.
And even after that year at OU, he was considered. I mean, when they took him in the second round, that was looked at as a reach. Most people thought that was a big reach, and he's playing incredibly well. He's in the Super Bowl and got a good chance to win it. Amazing.
I like what Joel Klatt said about him this week. He had to. You can claim him if you're Oklahoma. You can claim him if you're Alabama. But the fact of the matter is he had to leave Alabama. He had been replaced and had to leave Alabama to get to where he is now. He couldn't have gone straight from Alabama as Tua's backup to starting in the Super Bowl 3 years later, right? He couldn't have. There's no way. There's no chance. He had to go and spend that year at Oklahoma learning from Lincoln Riley and improving his draft stock to the point where he got drafted, and the Eagles quarterback situation was bad enough that they threw an untested rookie in, 2/3 of the way through his rookie season, and he's been great ever since. All that stuff had to transpire. I love the fact that you got guys like Joel Klatt saying, Alabama, you've got enough players. You don't need to claim him. I told you last week, I think it's idiotic for Alabama or for anybody to say Alabama can't claim him. He signed with Alabama. He played 3 years for Nick Saban. He was an unbelievable impact player early in his career, first 3 years of his career. Alabama and he graduated from Alabama. Alabama absolutely gets to claim him, but so does Oklahoma because that 1 year, man, it was spectacular. Unbelievable, the numbers. Go back and look at the numbers that he put up and the records that he set that year. It's just unbelievable.
But he still had that red spat tape on his ankles that didn't match the crimson of the uniforms against Houston. So I know that will. We talked about that was a Sunday home game. We talked about Friday home games earlier, trying to remember that. That was a Sunday home game for the Sooners. Different circumstances, but
how strange.
I think the red spat worked. Why not? You're doing something different. Why not?
I just remember coming out of that and having a certain segment of the fan base being upset about that, and I was like, "Look, if that's what people are mad about, you're in a good spot. If the conversation driver on a Monday, is what color tape you're taping your ankles with, then there's not been a lot that went wrong for you in that Houston game."
People have revisionist history, man. When he left Alabama, I mean the joke in the book on him was this is a running back playing quarterback. He can't throw, and he's come a long way. So who you got? You guys got the Eagles and Hurts, Lane, Calcaterra, Sermon, or you got the Chiefs with Orlando, Creed, Winchester, and Mr. Blake Bell?
We still got a week to think about it, but the question is, which former OU quarterback is going to lead his team to victory? Is it Jalen Hurts or is it Blake Bell?
Right.
Clearly. I don't need a week. If you guys have ever wondered what that is, it's because I support Raiders and Pirates left, right, and center right there. And so I will not be throwing my lot in with the Goons from Kansas City.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the hate. I've talked to Marty Schottenheimer one time. I interviewed him for about a half hour in his office. The hate that exists between these two franchises is not fake.
Correct.
All Eagles. Eagles then for Ryan. Yeah, it should be a fun game. I think the Eagles are the best team. We'll see, but they have had
if the Eagles win, though, Ryan, if the Eagles win, you're going to have to put up with 365 days of Chisholm.
Look,
is that worth it to you?
Look, so in the preseason, as a joke, I told him just flat out, like, the Eagles are winning the Super Bowl. You're just going to have to get with it, and you're going to have to retire a Jalen Hurts jersey in your living room. And he was mad because he thought I'd been cursing them the whole way. And who's the idiot now? Me as the joke, backing his way into maybe the Super Bowl champion. I'll take it.
The thing is, I think the Eagles are a better team, but Mahomes is just a different dude. So he's a hard one to bet against ever. So should be a fun game. Look forward to that in a couple of weeks. Crazy. Jalen, the first OU quarterback to take his team to the Super Bowl because Troy Aikman does not count. So nuts. Really is nuts.
I want to do a what if.
Sure.
I want to do a what if. What if Troy Aikman doesn't break his leg against Miami, stays at OU, wins the national championship, comes back the next year, probably does something really great again, right? And goes to the NFL. Where does the wishbone go in the 80s? You know, that national championship would have belonged to Troy Aikman and that defense. The defense, let's not forget, we talked about the wishbone and Jamel Holloway, but that defense was unbelievable. So how do we view the end of the Barry Switzer era, transitioning away from the wishbone into the passing offense of the late 80s, early 90s? And everybody around here is claiming Troy Aikman no matter where he went to college. If that's the case, if he goes and wins that national championship in 85. All he did was break his leg, people. Stop hating on Troy Aikman.
Yeah, that's always so fascinating because it's like when we had this conversation, so like Joe Burrow gets brought up because he's similar. Joe Burrow never won the starting job at Ohio State, then transferred, then had the meh year at LSU before really turning it on. Troy Aikman won the starting job through no fault of his own because Miami came through and did that to him. And then, like, I'm sorry, if you win a national championship, you're not going to change it, right? So, like, it's not Troy Aikman's fault that he ended up a UCLA Bruin. I totally get if anyone's just like, can't claim Troy Aikman at all. It's just that one of all is like, Jalen Hurts, it's very easy for me. OU and Alabama both get to claim him. Joe Burrow, very easy for me. Sorry, Ohio State, you didn't start him. That's an LSU thing. Troy Aikman, I'm just like, hey, whatever you want to do, I'm probably cool with it because that one is truly complicated.
I'm just making these numbers up in the back of my head from 30 years of memory, but he was something like 6 of 6 for 140 yards passing and had like 40 yards rushing in the first quarter, man. He was slicing those dudes up at Miami, and then he breaks his leg. Thanks, Jerome Brown. Appreciate you. That obviously got Jamel Holloway off the bench. What was Jamel Holloway doing there anyway? Best option quarterback in the country out of Compton, California. And here's Troy Aikman in front of him. 6'4", 220-pound Troy Aikman, and the option quarterback comes to Norman, Oklahoma. That never made sense to me. he was the perfect guy at the perfect time.
Well, I think Callaway is probably like, what's a Henrietta?
Yeah.
The whole space-time continuum goes off the rails if Troy Aikman doesn't get hurt. It's like I've watched Back to the Future enough times to know that the butterfly effect of that would this may be the all Hawkeyes podcast or something if that had happened. The whole world is different. The whole planet. Bob Stoops probably doesn't even code like it all just the ripple effect. Who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It is fun to play around with. But long story short, you guys are winning the Super Bowl one way or another, and we'll look forward to that in a couple of weeks. And we get to turn the page to the XFL and old Bob Stoops and how that's going to go. There's a lot of OU guys in the XFL, so we'll peek in on that from time to time after the NFL's over. All right, we'll wrap up this segment. We'll come back. Other sports to get to. Basketball we referenced earlier. Holy moly. Molly-whopping Alabama out of nowhere. We'll talk about that, as well as the women's basketball team, what they've been doing. Taylor Robinson, record breaker. And we'll wrap up with some other sports as well on the way out next up here on the AllSooners Podcast. Final segment of the AllSooners Podcast, episode 172. Send you on your merry way here to get through some last few things. Let's start with men's hoops. What a difference a week can make. Last week on this show, we sat here and we laid it all out there because they had just gotten crushed by TCU. They looked like they had given up, and we basically were like, man, this season put a fork in them. Porter Moser, what's the job security level? They turned around and played the best game that they've played under Porter. They crushed number 2 Alabama on Saturday. They beat them 93-69, and it wasn't even that close. It was worse than 24 points. If it wasn't just for the fact that it's OU versus Alabama, we would have all said this game's over 10 minutes in. But because of the teams, we held on to believe it when it's actually zeros on the clock. Oklahoma dominated. Grant Sherfield played fantastic, a 30-piece. Jalen Hill continues his great season. Tanner Groves had his best game probably of the year. What a performance. I mean, what can you say? I mean, the fact that number 2 Bama walked in there and left just getting smacked around, it still doesn't feel like I still look back at it and think like I can't believe that happened. It was an unbelievable performance. It all came together. I mean, it was borderline perfect.
This Oklahoma team is driving fans to pull their hair out. You lose close games to great teams like Kansas and Baylor, and then Texas. You get blown out by bad teams like Oklahoma State. And TCU's not a bad team, but you're getting blown out by TCU, and nobody knows what to make. And at some point, I think Porter said the TCU game was the first game that we haven't competed, the first game that we didn't respond, stuff like that. There's no hope for this basketball team against the number 2 team in the country coming into your gym. And what happens? The impossible happens. They come out and they just lay the wood to Alabama. Who saw that coming? I guess the Oklahoma basketball team did because nobody else did.
Yeah, I mean, when you put it in perspective, it was Oklahoma as a program, their first win over a top 2 team since OU toppled number 1 Kansas in the Big 12 tournament in 2002. It was, I believe CBS Sports put this out there, the largest margin of victory for an unranked team over a top 5 team in the history of
top 2, I think.
Or top 2 in the history of the poll. That goes back to like 48 or 50, basically. That shows you the magnitude of what happened in the Lloyd Noble Center. And yeah, I mean, Sherfield firing early. Jalen Hill, who drew the assignment of like, he's going to be a lottery pick, probably a top 5 pick in Brandon Miller from Alabama. He held him to 4 of 14, or as a team Oklahoma did. That was a lot of Jalen Hill on top of the 26 points on the other end. But for me, the thing that stuck out is, you played with pace. Like, it wasn't, oh my gosh, it just absolutely full throttle. They still got into their half-court sets, all that stuff. But I know that one of their things they wanted to do is not let Alabama clamp down and defend for 25 seconds. Guys, there are a lot of good defenses in the Big 12. Why don't you do that for all of your schools in the Big 12? Like, you don't have to, when we say pace, you don't have to put up 90 shots a game. But Sherfield looked comfortable immediately. And in the first half, you had threes from Sherfield, Hill, Cortez, Uzan. Like, I don't think it's any coincidence that the entire offense looked settled. And then they were at a point where you didn't have to worry about everything getting stagnant in the last 3 minutes because you were just killing out the clock. So that was a
Yes.
really impressive performance. Jalen Hill defensively, Tanner Groves as well, got it figured out, had 3 blocks. So it's big for them rolling into Wednesday night. Bedlam, but it's 12:14 p.m. on Wednesday. Right now we're recording this. Oklahoma State's in the bottom 4 of the Big 12. You have to win all of those games at home. No excuses. I don't care if you got blown out in the second half in Stillwater. If you want to be a tournament team, if you want to take this momentum and try and seize it, you got to win tonight by any means necessary. You just have to.
Credit where it's due, too. I mean, you got to give a lot of credit to Porter just getting the guys revved up to play. I mean, because that's something that's been consistent. We talked about that last week. They've never given up under him. They've always played really hard. That's never been the issue. The issue has been just the team not being good enough. But they've always played really hard, and they've battled, and they scrap, and they bounce back from tough loss after tough loss after tough loss. Well, they got blown out at TCU, like we were just saying. Didn't really show up in that game. Bama coming in, we all kind of thought they might just not even be into this, and they were. They were dialed in. The crowd was awesome. It was packed in there. First court storm for me. I've never been to a court. That's a first one. Plenty of field storms. We've had more than enough experience with that in the last couple of years. We've had like 10. But first court storm, it was great. I mean, it was one of those games where the stars aligned and it all came together. Offensively, defensively, the crowd. It was just one of those kind of perfect games. And a reporter talked about it. Ryan, you wrote about it, that this was the vision. This is what he hoped for. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what you hope for. That's the dream scenario. So now you have Bedlam tonight, like Ryan said. The first game in Stillwater was just a couple of weeks ago. Didn't go well. You let it half. OSU blitzed them in the second half. They got almost like single-digit stops in the second half. OSU tripled their score, basically, just in the final 20 minutes. Now you got to bounce back. Like Ryan said, it's a must-win. OSU's not, they're not a bad team, I wouldn't really say, but they're, by Big 12 standards, they're beatable, especially at home. Huge game tonight, Bedlam. Ryan and I will be there. We'll see what happens. This is a monster game, though.
Josh, you said it was your first court storm. That's the thing that's going to stand out to me about this was the scene, the mob scene on the court after the Alabama game. Because I've been watching Oklahoma football since the early 80s, and I'm sure I'm wrong about this, but in my head, I'm looking for that little scrap. I'm looking for that little memory of, oh yeah, I remember when. I don't ever remember this happening. Number one, the team has been either too good for you to court storm, right, or not good enough to win those games, right? Or the third option, the fan base is so apathetic about what's going on the basketball floor, they don't care to storm the court. So all those three things together, where great teams don't storm the court, bad teams don't storm the court because they don't win, and the fans don't care enough about the basketball team. All those three things together, I think that was the first time in my memory that I've ever seen that at OU.
Yeah, I remember when Trey's team beat Kansas with a little hakabuki for Azubuike. Like the students that are on the floor, there's like that small segment of students that are on the floor and then everybody else in the stands. I remember those like 20 students coming out onto the floor to celebrate, but it was not this was, you had students who had gone around to the other end of the floor by the tunnel where they could flood in from both sides and kind of circumnavigate the event staff. That was a legitimate court storming. It's a scene that we've only seen in football, in Waco, in Stillwater, this year in Lubbock, where a freaking service dog was on the field. I will never forget the service dog who stormed the field in Lubbock. The OU student section did not have a service dog on the court at the Lloyd Noble Center. So step it up, guys. Next time, bring your dogs.
I want to say, I could be misremembering, didn't they storm the court against Kansas with Buddy one time when Buddy tipped it in at the buzzer? I think that might have been a court storm situation pre-Final Four, so like 15 or 14.
Maybe, I don't remember.
I think that was more, I mean, it's a big deal to beat Kansas, but I think that was almost more of a just spur of the moment because it was a buzzer-beating tip-in, and run out there. But yeah, it was different, and we'll see how it looks tonight. The cherry on top of the whole Alabama thing, which is going to be a game that I think we'll probably remember for a long time. And those guys, no matter what happens the rest of the season, Jalen Hill and those guys, they'll remember that. That was an all-time game. But the cherry on top of the whole Alabama thing, did you guys see what they did last night to Vanderbilt?
Yes.
They bounced back. First game after losing to OU, and Nate Oates was mad in that post game. They beat Vanderbilt last night, 101-44. That is called taking out some aggression. OU owes Vanderbilt an apology. That's their fault that happened. Absolute slaughtering.
That's a message to the selection committee, isn't it?
Well, well, the funny thing is, you mentioned Nate Oates. Another takeaway that I just didn't write about because it was not important for what we had kind of saw was a lot of times when we think, the Big 12, Big East challenge thing, the Big 12 SEC challenge, ESPN, it's a made-for-TV thing. And for the Big 12, it doesn't really matter because if you go 500 in Big 12 play, you're a lock for the tournament. But Nate Oates was on edge, and he was really upset with how his team played because he was like, look, guys, the SEC Big 12 Challenge is incredibly important for the SEC because if they go and have a strong showing, that was going to be something they were including in all their media stuff the rest of the way to try and bolster the seeds of everyone in the conference. So that was a game that the Alabama players didn't maybe look as prepared for, but like Nate Oates had a huge edge about him that he was like, I tried to tell him, this is a good basketball team. They play in the Big 12. That league's just different. And so it wasn't like Nate Oates and Alabama were overlooking. Like Nate Oates has hung another L in the Lloyd Noble Center. He remembers that place.
Yeah, no, they 2 years ago. Yeah, like you're saying, they came and left with a big loss. Hat tip to Ben Colagelli because this is just amazing. Oklahoma 12-2 in their last 14 games against the SEC. 12-2. That's like not coincidental number. You are good against the SEC. And some SEC teams they had no business beating, like Alabama this time, Arkansas last year in Tulsa, among others.
Well, the only two losses are to number 1 Auburn last year, and to Arkansas this year.
Yeah. Pretty amazing.
Think about that. This is a school that's transitioning into the SEC, right?
Really? Are they?
Look at their recent numbers in football against the SEC. Look at their recent numbers in basketball. Baseball, you might as well throw that out there too, right? Mm-hmm. Skip, shout out.
Florida.
And softball, the Big Four. And for that matter, women's gymnastics goes into LSU and beats LSU. This is it makes you wonder as they transition to the SEC and everybody's saying how tough it's going to be. Is it really?
It's going to be good for basketball. Getting out of the meat grind of the Big 12 and go to the SEC where there's big games, but there's also way more winnable games is going to be good for the Big 12 or for Oklahoma in due time. So, great win there. We'll see what they do tonight at Bedlam. Ryan will be there, all the coverage.
Red Panda?
Red Panda
will be there.
Now, I saw Red Panda at the Peak earlier this season for a Thunder game, and she dropped the bowls. So she owes me. Yeah, she owes a bounce back to me. So we'll see.
Big bounce back spot from Red Panda as well. We will about 9 p.m. at Josh Callaway at _Ryan Chapman, wall to wall on Twitter. We will have the Red Panda coverage you seek.
I usually go in at halftime and get something to drink, use the bathroom, but I got to stay out there, I guess, and shoot Red Panda, video Red Panda.
You owe it to Red Panda.
Yeah, I'm gonna step up. I always think this is such a stupid my brain thought. Do you think she gets sick of the song? It plays that same song every time she performs, which is basically every night. Like 350 days a year. It's that same song.
She probably doesn't hear it.
She may lock in and not even hear it. I could see that. She's a legend. That much we know. But yeah, she dropped the Bulls, so I need a bounce back. Let's get a bounce back. Shifting over to the women, they lost on Saturday to Iowa State in Ames. That was 2 losses in a row because they lost to Texas as well last week. So a couple of rough games in a row too on the road. Now Taylor Robertson did break the record. We'll talk about that in just a second. 2 straight losses. They bounced back. They beat TCU last night, who we talked about before. They stink. Worst team in the Big 12. Kind of a get-right game, you hope, for Oklahoma's sake. What do you make of them before we get to the record? What do you make of that team? How legitimate of a contender to make a deep run are they? Because they have spurts where I'm thinking, okay, for sure, this team is legit. Several good wins in a row, but then back-to-back losses to good teams. But back-to-back losses, and you're kind of wondering, okay, maybe they're not as good as we thought. Where are you at right now? What's your temperature on that team right now?
I was a little concerned the way the Texas game went. They ended up losing by 20. Taylor hit the 2 threes in the first quarter, and then she got like 2 looks the rest of the game. Like her teammates were not screening for her. They were not moving to get her the basketball in shooting position, okay? And something clicked in a bad way for Oklahoma that game. First of all, Texas was red hot, but something clicked. You could tell there was something going on. I don't know if they've reached a point in the season where they're tired or, first of 2 straight road games and their legs aren't under there. I don't know, but something went wrong against the Texas at Texas. And then they come back. Their next game is at Iowa State. That's like the perfect storm if you're the opponent is facing Oklahoma needing to win. And, Iowa State's really good. So you put those 2 factors together. They come home against TCU, who are they winless in conference play?
Yeah.
Like 0-11 in conference play, something like that. Brutal. But Oklahoma jumped out quickly, did what they had to do, established their style of play. I like Oklahoma to make a deep run if they don't have to face some 6'5" post monster who just eats them alive in the middle. Because Oklahoma plays with good pace, good tempo. They share the basketballs. Looking up last night, they won the game 101-78. They had 19 assists. Like 6 different players had at least 3 or 4 assists. It's like, what? Yeah, everybody shares the basketball and everybody's making shots. So I like Oklahoma to make a deep run. They need to figure out whatever that was, whatever phenomenon that was that derailed them at Texas. They need to make sure that never happens again because that was ugly basketball.
Yeah. Concern maybe isn't the right word, but I just think it's an interesting trend line maybe to follow when it comes to Oklahoma playing big-time NCAA tournament basketball. Last year, in the regular season, the Sooners swept Baylor. Huge accomplishment, but that was kind of the outlier. Because remember when they swept Baylor, it suddenly became oh my God, can OU win the Big 12 Conference outright? And what happened? They weren't able to get it done against Texas. They lost in Ames, the other really good teams in the conference, and OU kind of fell back to the really good, but not actually going to lock down the 1 seed. Then you get to Kansas City, and Kansas, who is a much better, much improved program, Oklahoma beats them and then just gets wiped by Baylor. You get to the NCAA tournament, the first real team they play, Notre Dame. I think everyone would prefer us not talk about how that went. This year, Utah, really good. I know it was the second night of a back-to-back, and Utah wasn't on the second night of a back-to-back. Awful scheduling circumstances, but OU was run off the floor. Baylor comes into Norman. You lose that game. You get behind early. It wasn't close. You have to battle back to beat still a fine Kansas team, but not an elite Kansas team. You have to battle back to beat a fine Oklahoma State team, but not an elite Oklahoma State team. Lost on the road to Texas. Lost on the road to Iowa State. You beat Iowa State at home, but that went down to the wire, and they lost Suarez in that game. So that was an Iowa State team that was kind of a little shell-shocked as they lost a key piece at center. I just worry that if things don't go well in the first half for the Sooners, their solution is to shoot their way out of it. And we've seen that can provide some really fun comebacks, but against the really, really, really good teams in college basketball, usually they put the clamps down. And so that's the key for Oklahoma is when they get into these big time games, they have to have good first halves because I think you saw it against Notre Dame last year. I think you've seen it against Texas and Iowa State and Baylor this year. The good teams don't let Oklahoma back into the game.
It's going to be an interesting finish of the season because, like we've said many times, you want to get that top 4 seed. You want to be at home if you can in the NCAA tournament. They're right on that border right now. So we'll see what they can do the rest of the way. Briefly mentioned it, but do want to make sure we acknowledge Taylor Robertson set the record most threes in a career. 500 freaking threes. That is so many shots from deep. She's automatic. She's made a 3, I think, in like 60-something straight games. Really cool. She got the record in Ames. She got a chance to go meet Steph Curry. It was a Thunder game on Monday. That was a really cool thing. They had a ceremony for her yesterday after the game. They brought real-life goats out, which was quite the move. I mean, this is one of those. Unfortunately for Taylor, the first pretty good chunk of her career, the team was just not winning, so she didn't get a lot of attention then. She is now, but one of the better Oklahoma players that they've had, period. I mean, you set this kind of record, you put yourself into rare air, like jersey retirement air down the road, in my opinion. I mean, you set a record like this, 500 plus threes. What an accomplishment. Big time stuff.
Yeah. In terms of sports parlance and how we view records in retrospect, the home run is like the top. You get a slam dunk in basketball or a 3-pointer in basketball. The home run is the home run. The home run goes over the fence and disappears. We never see it again. So to have the home run queen at your school is unbelievable. To have the home run queen and the 3-point queen at your school, what is going on in the OU athletics departments? What are they feeding these girls? That is some amazing stuff. Like Jocelyn Allo did in softball, she hit more home runs than Pete Incaviglia or any other baseball player. Taylor Robertson has hit more 3-pointers than Steph Curry or any other men's or women's basketball player. It's phenomenal. It's been fun to watch. She's got the record for most career threes, most times with 5 3-pointers in a game, 4 3-pointers in a game, I think 3 3-pointers in a game. She's unbelievable. And that scene where she got to meet Steph, we got a video on that if you guys want to watch it. AllSooners.com, click on the women's basketball link. Where she's standing there at Chesapeake, at Paycom Center, old habits die hard.
Right.
She's standing there at Paycom, and she's watching him go through his pregame shooting, and he's launching bomb after bomb, and they're all going in, of course. Then he comes over and talks to her and tells her, you're going to throw it to him, he's going to skip it to me, and I'm going to hit a 3 and go to the locker room. And worked perfectly. Check that out. Short little video. And then, they met, they hugged, he signed a jersey for her after the game.
Mm-hmm.
If you're Taylor Robertson right now, life is good.
Yeah, I think that was it Maddie Williams who said that Taylor Robertson told her that this is like my next 5 birthdays and Christmases just to be able to have that. And I think too, Steph Curry. So he did an interview with the NBC affiliate back in San Francisco, whoever airs their games, and what he pointed out too is it's not just that she shoots threes and makes them. He's like, she's a 44% 3-point shooter for her career. She's a 46% field goal for her career. He's like, I pride myself on being efficient as well as having range from everywhere. And she's kind of got that same thing about her. So to have that kind of praise from Steph Curry, I think the whole rest of the year is gravy for Taylor Robertson after that experience.
Pretty cool. So check that out if you haven't seen it. Like Hoover said, AllSooners.com, and we'll see how many more she can add to that record because she's still got quite a runway here of about 10 plus games to add to that number, which is sickly. Wrapping up here, any other sports stuff you want to hit? I will mention real quick that Big 12 baseball poll came out. OU 5th in the preseason poll. I mentioned that last week. I was curious to see where they would land, right smack dab in the middle, which makes sense. They are replacing a lot. I will add also, did you guys see, if you haven't, you need to go watch it. It's great. The video that OU Baseball put out of random players and Skip getting asked how to spell some of the names on the team.
Yeah.
All-timer, because Skip didn't even attempt Patrick Engskov. It's pretty funny. Good stuff. So I would check that video out. But yeah, 5th in the preseason poll. But that's about right. They can finish higher than that, certainly. But with all the uncertainty, all the players replaced, it was unlikely to me that they were going to get picked much higher than that by the other coaches. They're not in any preseason polls. They got to go prove it. And I think they have a good team, but it makes sense that they're not going to be picked high with how many new faces there are because other places just don't know them that well. So that was something. But anything else that stuck out to you guys?
Yeah. So if you're hanging on the edge of your seat to see where Oklahoma baseball was going to be rated in the preseason polls, 5th, 6th, 7th, whatever, I've got great news for you. You're probably hanging on the edge of your seat in regards to where the softball team is going to be rated. Guess what? They're number 1 in every poll, including the coaches poll. They're unanimous. Mm-hmm. Unanimous. When's the last time that happened?
Yeah, it's been a while for that. Oklahoma, I think Oklahoma and UCLA. I think those are the only 2 that have been in the top 25 of every single coaches poll since it started, softball wise. So no strangers to that. Did you guys see the Softball America 1st and 2nd and 3rd team All-Americans as well? So if you're keeping track at home, in softball, you have a designated player, right? So you have 10 starters, essentially. Oklahoma had 10 selections to the first, 2nd, and 3rd team All-Americans. They had 5 first-team All-Americans, 2 second-teamers,
not bad,
and 3 on the 3rd team. Pretty good when now 2 of those were Nicole May and Alex Stracco, so it wasn't like a perfect, like Alyssa Brito was left off. Whoever's going to play in 3rd and left field were left off. So it's not like perfect like-for-like entire starting lineup, but when you have 10 on the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd team, that's good. That's good. It's a good start.
And 3 pitchers.
Yeah, 3
Not
pitchers.
bad.
7 position players, 3 pitchers. Unbelievable.
Not bad. And
can they be better than 59-3, or does it matter as long as you win the national championship?
Honestly, this is going to sound bad. They've got a really tough schedule. Managing the distractions is going to be as difficult as the Big 12 outside of Oklahoma State, frankly.
NIL.
Because you've got, and I've seen, so this will be my 3rd season covering the team with AllSooners, right? And just in terms of, it used to be, hey, I need this, or that. And there was like a 1-day turnaround because it was like, yes, please cover it. And now it's like, let me crack open this massive media request schedule and see where I can fit you in. Like the volume on what they're doing off the field is way increased. Who have you mentioned? NIL, that got roped in last year, something they had to learn to manage. But as good as they are, that's going to be even more. I think it'll almost be more impressive to be able to not just replace Jocelyn Isle, stuff like that, but to manage everything outside of the just actually playing going on. That's going to be a big storyline for Oklahoma, and people don't want to hear that, but it's just the reality of the situation. They're getting pulled a lot of different ways, ways that even Patty Gasso's like, over these last 2 years, this is so much different coming out of the pandemic than I've ever seen. It's great for the sport, but it's a huge adjustment for her and the entire team.
Yeah, you're right. She's having to learn how to coach other things than just softball and a roster full of athletes.
Yeah.
She's having to learn how to coach young women who have NIL opportunities. And remember the thing last year, all the distractions that she talked about. She said we're operating at about a 5 or 6 on a scale of 10. That was like 2/3 of the way through the season that she said all that, right? So what was it? She pulled back an hour of practice per week or was it per week or per day?
It was.
An hour
It was
practice.
Yeah, it was basically carving out a bit at the end of every practice to
every practice.
Hey, everyone's got jobs of whether you're raking and shaking, or you doing this or that or whatever.
Cleaning up, picking up trash, emptying the trash bins, sweeping the floors in the clubhouse, raking leaves off the grass. She came up with that herself. Patty came up with that. Like, what do I have to do to get these guys to play at a higher level? She came up with that. What's she going to do now that, like you said, with the media requests, everything else it's at a more visible, they're under a bigger microscope now than they've ever been. How's Patty going to handle that?
If just as there's a thing called Skull Sparks, and what they do is they kind of monitor interaction. So if you like a tweet or you comment on Instagram on the OU softball stuff, that counts as like one interaction per any one of those. They released the numbers. OU softball would be the 10th biggest college football account. They would be number 10 in the country in interactions. They would be in the top 5 if men's basketball account interactions. And they are like 6 million clear of number 2 in the softball world interactions. So it's a huge microscope. It is not microscope. Sorry. It's a massive spotlight. You're looking through a Hubble telescope at this Oklahoma softball program as closely as they're monitored. So it'll be fascinating, but hopefully we should have some fresh softball content hitting the site by the weekend. If the weather's been, we already should have had the press conference, but weather's moved stuff around, which is totally fine. Get that. So hopefully if you're craving that softball content, I'm hoping by Saturday you should start to see that starting to flow back up there again at AllSooners.
Yeah, Ryan, get your ducks in a row because I'll be asking you next week's show because the season starts next Thursday, right? Next Thursday, so which is nuts. Where we're at that time, so you'll be locking it in. Next Wednesday's show, you're locking it in. How many wins? Natty, all that. Well, you have until Wednesday to.
You'll have my pick for the entire. I'll just go down the schedule real quick. I'll give you wins and loss for every single game. Yeah,
all 60 games or whatever. Next Thursday that starts. And if you're new to us, first off, welcome aboard. But if you're not, or if you whatever I said, if you're new to us, Ryan covers softball extremely closely. We'll have recaps and stuff of every game all season long. Same for me from baseball. So we got Diamond Sports on lock at AllSooners.com. So we'll have you covered all throughout the season, and that starts next Thursday, which is pretty nuts. And then baseball the week after that. So we're at that time.
I'll cover spring football for you guys. Don't worry, I got that.
Perfect. Spoiler:
we got some time on that one. It's not until after spring break, so we got some time.
Yeah, I think I will be picking the Oklahoma softball team to win the Big 12, and I think they're going to make the Women's College World Series as well.
Upset alert on the Big 12. They're not the defending champion for the first time ever, right? So,
well,
just saying.
Yeah. God, do we have to get into the weird semantics of splitting? Like, now we have a regular season champion and a tournament champion. I'm just annoyed by all of it.
That is. You get a tournament championship and you get a regular season championship. They're defending Big 12 champions in the regular season, and I think they'll embrace that one.
Yeah, it's I don't want to have to. Whatever.
They will win the Big 12 tournament. It'll be an absolute mission when they get there. I can probably guarantee that.
They'll want to be there this time. They did not care last go round. They won't tell you that, but they did not care last go round.
Yeah. All right. I think that's it for us. Good show. Got a lot of schedule talk, which is great for me, right in my wheelhouse. And yeah, we look on to next week. Like Ryan said, we'll have some softball recap to talk about on the back end of next week's show, as well as all the latest, anything recruiting, anything football. We're going to have it for you. Of course, you know that on AllSooners.com, as well as basketball recaps, Bedlam, and all the other stuff, women back and home this weekend, things like that. We'll have that for you on next week's show, back next Wednesday. You can catch that one on Spotify, Google, iHeart, wherever you get your podcast. If you have an Amazon-enabled device, just say, Alexa, play the AllSooners podcast. Also post on our website, AllSooners.com. Click on the playlist on your phone, your tablet, or your computer. You can watch all the shows on Hoover's YouTube page, John Hoover Media. That's it for us. We'll be back next Wednesday. For Ryan Chapman and John Hoover, I'm Josh Callaway. We'll catch you guys next time.